Why your brain's reward system is rigged against success. Here's something nobody tells you about winning. The biggest obstacle between you and everything you want isn't lack of opportunity, connections, or talent. It's a tiny molecule in your brain that's been hijacked by modern society. And until you understand how to reclaim it, you're playing a game you can't win. That molecule is dopamine, and right now, it's working against you. Let's talk about something wild. Your brain was designed over millions of years to reward you for survival behaviors: hunting food, finding shelter, reproducing. Every time you accomplish something hard and important, your brain flooded you with dopamine as a way of saying, "Do that again." This system worked perfectly for keeping humans alive in dangerous environments. But here's the problem: that same ancient system is now being exploited by everything around you. Think about slot machines. Casino designers discovered something neuroscientists would only confirm decades later: unpredictable rewards create the most powerful dopamine responses. That's why gambling is so addictive. You're not chasing money, you're chasing the neurochemical rush that comes with uncertainty and occasional wins. And now that same psychological mechanism has been weaponized by your phone, your apps, your entire digital ecosystem. Every notification, every like, every autoplay video is engineered to trigger dopamine release without you doing anything meaningful. You scroll for hours feeling like you're accomplishing something because your brain is getting its chemical fix. But here's the devastating truth: when your brain gets easy dopamine from meaningless activities, it stops rewarding you for hard, important work. Why would it give you dopamine for writing that book, building that business, or training for that marathon when it can get the same chemical rush from watching cat videos? Now, let the people who actually win in life, the founders who build billion-dollar companies, the artists who create masterpieces, the athletes who dominate their sports, they've all figured out something crucial. You have to deliberately starve your brain of cheap dopamine so it becomes hungry enough to reward you for real achievement. They've essentially reverse-engineered their neurochemistry. When Steve Jobs went on his infamous fruit-only diets and walked barefoot, everyone thought he was eccentric. But what he was actually doing was creating such intense dopamine scarcity that even small creative breakthroughs felt euphoric to his brain. When you remove all the easy wins, your brain recalibrates what deserves a reward. Suddenly, solving a difficult problem feels better than any quick pleasure ever could. The uncomfortable reality is this: every minute you spend on activities that give you easy dopamine, you're training your brain to avoid difficulty. You're literally rewiring your neural pathways to seek comfort instead of growth. And the scariest part, you don't even notice it happening until you wake up one day and realize you haven't accomplished anything meaningful in years. This isn't about willpower. This is about understanding that you're in a neurological war, and if you don't take control of your dopamine system, someone else will control it for you. Drop the word reclaim in the comments if you're ready to take your dopamine system back. And hit that subscribe button because this is just the beginning. The hidden dopamine pattern that separates champions from quitters. Let me show you something that'll blow your mind about how winners actually think. They don't have more motivation than you. They don't have superhuman discipline. What they have is a completely different relationship with failure. And it all comes down to how their brains process dopamine during setbacks. Look at Thomas Edison's approach to inventing the light bulb. He famously tried over 10,000 different materials before finding one that worked. Most people hear that story and think, wow, what incredible persistence. But that's not what was really happening. Edison had trained his brain to release dopamine not when he succeeded, but when he gathered new information. Each failed experiment wasn't a disappointment to his nervous system, it was a reward. He literally felt good about failing because his brain interpreted data collection as progress. Compare that to how most people handle setbacks today. You try something new, it doesn't work immediately, and your brain interprets that as failure. No dopamine gets released. Actually, worse than that, you get a stress response. Your amygdala starts firing, cortisol floods your system, and your brain learns attempting difficult things feels bad. Do that enough times, and you develop learned helplessness without even realizing it. The boxing champion Muhammad Ali understood this instinctively. Before sports psychology was even a field, He was doing something incredibly sophisticated with his neurochemistry. He'd trash talk his opponents, predict the exact round he'd win, make outrageous claims. Everyone thought it was just showmanship. But what he was really doing was creating dopamine anchors. Every time he made a prediction and followed through, his brain got a massive dopamine hit. He turned pressure into a dopamine delivery system. Now, here's where this gets practical for you. You need to start celebrating failure differently. I'm not talking about toxic positivity where you pretend failure doesn't hurt. I'm talking about neurological reframing. When you attempt something difficult and fail, you immediately identify what you learn. You write it down. You acknowledge it as data. You're literally teaching your brain that the attempt itself is the win, not just the outcome. Elite military units do this with after-action reviews. They analyze every mission, successful or not, and extract lessons. The dopamine reward comes from the learning process, not from perfect execution. That's why they can attempt high-risk operations without the paralysis that comes from fear of failure. Their brains have been conditioned to find reward in the process itself. Think about video game design for a second. Good games are addictive because they give you constant feedback and small wins even when you're losing. You die in the game, but you respawn with new knowledge. You lost, but you unlocked a new ability. The dopamine keeps flowing even during setbacks. Now ask yourself, why aren't you designing your real life the same way? The difference between someone who builds something remarkable and someone who quits after the first obstacle isn't talent. It's that winners have trained their brains to extract dopamine from difficulty itself. Smash that like button if this just changed how you see failure. Comment reframe if you're going to start rewarding yourself for attempts, not just outcomes. The dopamine deficit strategy that billionaires won't talk about. You want to know the real secret behind extraordinary performance? It's not about getting more dopamine, it's about strategically creating less. And this is where things get counterintuitive, because everything in modern culture tells you to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. But the people at the top of every field are doing the exact opposite, and they're doing it deliberately. Let's examine the training methods of Olympic swimmers. These athletes spend years waking up at a.m. to swim in cold water for hours. Their bodies are in constant pain. Most people look at that and think they're just tougher than average. But here's what's actually happening. They're creating such a massive dopamine deficit during training that even small improvements feel ecstatic. When you remove all comfort and easy rewards, your brain becomes hypersensitive to progress. A tenth of a second off your time becomes more rewarding than binge watching an entire series. Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest humans alive, still lives in the house he bought in 1958. He drives his own car. He eats McDonald's for breakfast. He's deliberately keeping his baseline dopamine low so that business victories feel incredible by contrast. Meanwhile, most people upgrade their lifestyle with every small success, which means they need bigger and bigger wins to feel the same neurochemical reward. They're on a hedonic treadmill, and they don't even know it. Here's the strategy that changes everything. You need to create what I call dopamine fasting zones. These are specific periods where you deliberately eliminate all easy pleasure sources. No phone, no music, no snacks, no entertainment. Just you and difficult work. The first few hours are brutal. Your brain will literally throw a tantrum like a toddler denied candy. But here's what happens next. Your brain realizes easy dopamine isn't coming, so it starts making hard work feel rewarding instead. Ancient Spartan warriors did this without understanding the neuroscience. They lived in deliberately harsh conditions, ate bland food, slept on uncomfortable surfaces. Modern people think they were just masochistic, but what they actually created was a neurological environment where combat excellence became the highest dopamine source available. Their brains had no choice but to make fighting feel good. Now, let's talk about how you implement this without moving to Sparta. Pick one day per week where you go completely analog. No screens, no processed food, no easy entertainment. You work on your most important project with nothing but water and simple meals. Your brain will hate you at first, but after a few weeks, something remarkable happens. That day becomes your most productive day because your dopamine-starved brain makes deep work feel euphoric. Second strategy: delay gratification deliberately. When you accomplish something, don't immediately reward yourself. Wait, let the anticipation build, then give yourself the reward. This isn't about punishment, it's about training your brain that good things come to those who can tolerate discomfort. You're literally increasing your dopamine receptor sensitivity. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't lucky. They've just learned to manipulate their neurochemistry in ways most people never consider. Subscribe to this channel if you want more performance science that actually works. Drop deficit in the comments if you're willing to try dopamine fasting, your 30-day dopamine rewiring protocol for permanent performance. Let's get brutally practical. Everything we've talked about means nothing if you don't have a system to implement it. So here's the protocol that will completely rewire how your brain processes reward and effort. This isn't theory, this is the exact framework that transformed how high performers across every field approach their neurochemistry. First, you need to audit your current dopamine sources. For the next 3 days, track every single thing that gives you pleasure. Social media, food, entertainment, shopping, whatever. Write down how long you engage with each source and how you feel afterward. What you're looking for are the activities that give you immediate pleasure but leave you feeling empty an hour later. Those are your dopamine traps. They're training your brain to crave quick hits instead of sustained achievement. Now comes the hard part. You're going to eliminate 80% of those easy sources for 30 days. Not reduce them, eliminate them. Delete the apps, block the websites, remove the temptation entirely. Your brain needs to experience genuine dopamine scarcity. This will be uncomfortable. You'll feel bored, anxious, maybe even depressed for the first week. That's not a bug, it's a feature. You're resetting your baseline. While you're in dopamine deficit, you're going to establish what I call achievement anchors. These are difficult tasks you commit to doing every single day, and you attach specific rewards to completing them. Maybe you do an hour of deep work on your most important project. Then you get your favorite coffee. Maybe you complete a workout, then you get to watch one episode of a show. The key is consistency and conditionality. The reward only comes after the difficult task, never before. Here's where most people screw this up. They make the tasks too ambitious. Don't try to write an entire book chapter or run 10 miles right away. Start with something that's hard, but definitely achievable. Maybe it's writing for 20 minutes or running 1 mile. The goal is to create a reliable dopamine response to effort, not to achieve perfection. Your brain needs to learn that effort equals reward before you can increase the difficulty. By week 2, something interesting starts happening. The difficult tasks start feeling less difficult, not because they got easier, but because your brain is starting to release dopamine in anticipation of doing them. You've created a neural pathway that associates that specific behavior with reward. This is exactly how habits form at the neurochemical level. By week 3, you can start reintroducing some of the easy pleasures you eliminated. But here's the rule. They only come after you've hit your daily achievement anchors. You've now created a hierarchy where earned pleasures feel better than unearned ones. Your brain has been completely recalibrated. The final step is to stack these wins. Each week, you add one more difficult task to your achievement anchor list. Maybe you start with deep work, then add exercise, then add learning something new. You're gradually building a life where difficult, meaningful activities become your primary dopamine sources. This is how exceptional people are made. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how performance actually works. Comment rewired if you're committing to the 30-day protocol. Important notice: this content is for educational and informational purposes only. The information presented does not replace medical, psychological, or mental health professional guidance. If you have concerns about dopamine, brain chemistry, or mental health, please consult a qualified healthcare provider. Historical examples are used for illustrative and educational purposes.